ready for the President's assent. The relevant provisions shall have to be stood down. The other day, there was this squabbling about procedural motions, and I was telling them that it was not required. Once the committee makes the determination, and perhaps it will be relevant for me to read the appropriate, yes. Article 106 of the Constitution, clause 13 provides, where it is determined by a committee of Parliament appointed for the purpose that a particular bill is of an urgent nature, the provisions of the preceding clauses of this article, other than clause 1 and paragraph A of clause 2, shall not apply, and accordingly, the President shall give his assent to the bill on its presentation for assent.
All right, so welcome back, and let's start the conversation. We're starting with you, Professor Ernest Kofi Abochi. So, Article 104 says, except as otherwise stated in this, provided in this Constitution, matters in Parliament shall be determined by votes of the majority of members present and voting, with at least half of all the members of Parliament present. Professor Kofi Abochi, the minority staged a walkout. Sarah Adjoa-Safo, Member of Parliament for Dom Kwabenya, is not in the country. That we know. Did Parliament meet this constitutional provision in the decision it took yesterday? Hello, Prof. Can you hear me? Is Professor Kofi Abochi with us? Okay, I think we don't have Professor Kofi Abochi. We'll try and get back to Professor Kofi Abochi. But let me start off with you, Professor Peter Korte, because the institute which you heard, ISA, had cause to complain about the 1.75% at the time. You talked about maybe considering a 0.5 to 1%. Even there, you have one or two issues. But you also, talked about the fact that it was going to affect government's digitalization agenda. What is your take on the passage of the E-levy now that it's been reduced to 1.5%?
Hello, Winston.
Yes, Prof.
Were you talking to me?
Yes, I was asking you. Your institute had a few concerns in papers presented by some of your members that the E-levy would hurt us. The Ministry of Finance had come out to say, well, that was what we needed at the time. Let's look at how the E-levy is going to impact the Ghanaian, first from a digitalization point of view, and secondly, from a business point of view.
Well, good morning to you and to your discerning listeners. The E-levy would have both positive and negative effects.
From the positive effect, what would be the positive effect, Prof? Hello, Professor Korte. Okay, we'll work the lines and come back to you shortly. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Wow, I just paid my taxes right now. Since they started this pay from anywhere, it has become easier, cra.
Easy, cra. Now nobody has an excuse. So long journey no ye jai. Tax, why? Effie, don't tell me you have not been paying taxes, so.
No, I'm tired of paying. Don't be. It's the taxes we pay that government will use to improve the markets and to build the nation, oh.
I don't know. It just takes your whole day. Hey, you mean you have been going to the GRA office?
Effie, unye current, cra. Come and join us. So I'm not paying taxes, no.
Pay your taxes online, at the bank, or from your phone. Together, we can build a great nation. GRA.
Right, so welcome back, and thank you very much for staying with us here on the Super Morning Show on Joy99.7 FM. So let me start with you, Professor Kofi Abochi. My question is very simple. Article 104.1 says, except as otherwise provided in this Constitution, matters in Parliament shall be determined by the votes of the majority of members present and voting, with at least half of all the members of Parliament present. Now, knowing that Sarah Adjoa-Safo was not present in Parliament yesterday, and the majority with 137 members. Was this constitutional provision met in the passage of the E-levy?
That obviously boils down to mathematical, someone would say mathematical constitutionalism, but I think the determination of what constitutes how is not too debatable.
Sure.
And so if you have a house constituted by 275, then invariably, rounding it up without measuring in house, invariably you're going to have 138 being the minimum number that meets the threshold of house. So on the face of it, that invariably is not house. That is a little under house.
So on the face of it, Parliament did not meet this constitutional provision?
Hello?
I am asking that, so on the face of it, Parliament did not meet this constitutional provision?
On the face of it, yes. I mean, on the face of it, the house would invariably be 178. That's if, as I indicated, you can't speak in house. You can't speak in house. So you have to round it up. And in that case, on the face of it, you're speaking of 138. Because 137, together with another 137, would result in 274. And so you'll be at house. So on the face of it, one expects that the minimum is 138.
And what does that mean for the decision taking then?
If you follow that constitutional logic, then invariably what it means is that the decision did not meet the minimum criteria or requirements expected of the decision makers under Article 104. The purpose of requiring a minimum of House of Parliament for any major decision is to expect that in the minimum, all decisions taken reflect at least a certain shade of participation. You do not want just a skewed number. So, for example, the House of 275, you don't expect that, say, 40 members in Parliament can take a decision that binds the entire House and for that matter the country. So the purpose of requiring that minimum number is just to ensure that there's a certain threshold in terms of the participants in decision making that reflects at least the broad constitutional Parliament. So that's the difficulty of not meeting the constitutional requirements. So on the face of it, the minimum number of house wasn't met. But I'm not sure whether you want to deal also with the issue of presence, because the walkout of the minority of itself does not deal with the fact that they were present. The minority haven't showed up in Parliament. If at any point in time after that they walked out of Parliament, it still doesn't affect the fact that they were present in Parliament. And so for purposes of those who were present in Parliament, once you show up in Parliament and once your presence was captured, and therefore if you pick the Hansard, for example, the Hansard will indicate that a certain number of people were present in the House at a certain point in time. If after that you walk out are just political symbolism. If you walk out, it still doesn't affect the fact that you were present. There's a distinction between being present and participating. So participation and presence are two different things. And that's why the Constitution sometimes uses the expression present and voting. Mm-hmm. Present and voting because you can be present without voting. Participation and presence are two different things. So the fact that they walked out of itself doesn't affect the fact that they were present. The question is whether that would affect the decision that was taken yesterday. And, they've advertised an intention of going to court, so invariably I'm sure that's something for the court, for which the court want to exercise a position on.
So the introduction of the present will lead me to what the majority did last year on the 30th of November. Now, the majority at the time set aside the rejection of the budget because the decision to reject the budget was taken by 137 members after they had walked out. Speaker Alban Badwin comes back and says, well, that should not have been the case because they were present. But if the majority believes that, taking a decision, you need to be at least 138, how does their, how can their decision today or yesterday be justifiable?
As I indicated, the question of quorum may relate to those who are present. Now, if presence is the material thing, my point I've indicated is that once you are in Parliament, so for example, someone can go to Parliament and go to his office briefly, pick something up and come back into the chamber. The person was present in Parliament. So the question of presence in Parliament is a question of record. That would have to be answered by reason of reference to the Hansard. So if we look at the Hansard, for example, and the Hansard captures a certain number of people in Parliament at that point, those people will be deemed to be present. Their participation is a different story. And so whether or not they chose to participate in the votes, whether or not they chose to participate in the deliberations, that is a matter which is distinguishable from presence. The question of presence is one which is often captured by the record, and often it has to do with who was in the House at the commencement of business. And so that distinction has to be made. And that may ultimately boil down to the determination of whether a quorum was in Parliament at the time the business began.
Let me just read a section of the Supreme Court's ruling in the Justice Abdullahi case. On page 19, it says, in effect, the framers of the Constitution placed voting in Parliament on a higher order, as you have indicated, of importance or magnitude than debating. Thus, while Parliament can commence business and proceed to debate a matter as long as at least 1/3 of its members are in attendance, it cannot proceed to take a decision on the matter by vote unless and until at least 1/2 of all members are present. Anyway, you've talked about the president subject to some, interpretation here and then. So we'd wait for the Supreme Court now that the minority has indicated that they're going to the Supreme Court. So let me bring in Peter Quartey at this point. Professor Peter Quartey, you've talked about the E-levy having both positives and negatives. Let's start with the positive first. What is the positive impact of the E-levy?
Yeah, hello, Winston. Yes, you'll recall that when we suffered the downgrade, one of the reasons were the fear that we may not be able to meet the needed revenue, but there's going to be a revenue gap. E-levy hangs in the balance, and that led to some capital flights, led to some exchange rate depreciations, inflation, and so on and so forth. So having passed the E-levy, that will give some sort of assurance that that revenue gap will be plugged in one way or the other, perhaps not fully, but at least there's some revenue that will be realized from this. So that's positive. Government revenue will increase to finance the activities that have been highlighted. And then, but my concern is the rate, and I'll come to that when we look at the negative. In terms of the negative, it's going to bring additional costs to consumers.
Yeah, but before you get to the negative, even the positive, Prof, before we get to the negative, the positive that you talk about. Now, in the last month, we saw a reduction in the value of mobile money transactions. We saw a similar one in December also. While that may not be the first, the timing is instructive. After November, when the budget was presented, we saw a decline. In December, which happens to be the month of Christmas, lots of transactions are expected within that time, but unfortunately, we did not see that resulting in an increase in mobile money transactions. Doesn't that tell you that even the revenue we're talking about raising, we may not get it, because then people have other options. They could choose to pay by cash, can't they?
Yes, listen, I was going to go to that when I looked
Okay.
at the negatives.
Okay.
Secondly,
Okay.
when you tax a commodity, you have to look at the elasticity. If it's inelastic, like tobacco, alcohol, fuel, some necessities, when you increase the price, people continue to buy, although some might reduce how much they consume, but not very much. But where it is elastic, where people have options, like the E-levy, the mobile services, e-transactions we are talking about, people have options. They can use cash. I can walk to my bank and pay cash into the other partner's account rather than using an electronic means to pay. Even online businesses, you have the option where you can buy and pay on delivery, and on delivery I pay cash. So it tells you that once there are options and you're going to tax, you ought to be very careful with the rate at which you tax. And that, for me, is why we recommended that a rate below 1%, perhaps 0.5 or 0.75%, is something that most consumers will cope with. But as the rate increases, be rest assured, people will find alternatives or substitutes, and you may not be able to realize the revenue you have earmarked.
Well, I mean, while we talk about, the usage of the e-levy being, mobile money being elastic, there are some persons who, for them, this is inelastic. They can't live without it. And so for those persons, how is that going to impact them?
Well, for those who would not use other alternatives, who cannot do anything but to use the service, it's going to impact on their cost of operations if they are running a business, because the customers will certainly react. Either they might, if they have alternatives, not use the service, or if they have to use it, then they have to pay. And that is going to add to their cost. And they may choose to consume less or consume same. Same with the business person. Once the money is in your mobile wallet, you ought to then transfer it to your bank account. That will come with a cost. And assuming you are transferring, let's say, 200,000 cities times 1.5%, that is quite significant. So it's going to encourage people, unless you have no option, it's going to encourage people to use other means, use check or cash or other means. But having said that, for me, I think the e-levy, if that will solve our problems, our revenue, help solve our revenue problems, I would support the e-levy, but at a lower rate than for us to go to IMF.
Why?
Just because as an academic, we are turning out students from our various tertiary institutions. People need jobs. Already there is youth unemployment is very high. Vulnerable employment, high youth unemployment, the youth bulge is still visible. So if you go to IMF and you have to free employment, and we lived in this before, I don't think it will augur well for us if we free employment. So if we can find ways to raise revenue and create some employment, I believe it's better than where we go for some of this harsh conditionalities, which does not augur well for us as a developing country.
Okay. But, Prof, in case you're transferring money from your mobile money wallet to your bank account, same person, that would not attract the e-levy. So I can decide to transfer money from my mobile money wallet to my bank account. According to the provisions of the bill, or the Act now, it wouldn't attract any charge unless it's to a different person. But before I wrap it up with you, let me get to Professor Kofi Abochi. So now that the minority has filed, a case at the Supreme Court, can the president go ahead and accent? They're basically telling him not to do that. Can the president go ahead and accent to it, and then it becomes law, and then it means we have to start paying? Hello, Prof. Professor Kofi Abochi. Professor Abochi, can you hear me? Well, I think we don't have Professor Abochi on the line. Let me wrap it up with you, Professor Peter Quartey. So, in effect, you're saying this would help us, at least it would help increase revenue generation. But what will be the impact of an increased revenue generation for the country Ghana? And also, what will be the impact of an increased revenue generation even for our credit ratings? Professor Peter Quartey, finally.
Yes, before I start on that, you made a point about if you transfer from your Bobo into your bank account, it doesn't attract a fee.
Yeah.
That's not my understanding of when I read the bill. So perhaps I may be wrong, but I'll consult and get back. But so it's going to bring some costs. Anybody who transfers or uses the e-transfer, be it from a bank, from bank to bank, or other means to pay for goods or services, will incur costs. It's good we're raising revenue to finance the gap, because we certainly need revenue. It's better than going to borrow and paying higher interest rates, which already we have reached the threshold. Once we raise additional revenue, of course, we need roads. We need to fix our roads. We need to create employment for the youth. The youth tax, for instance, will pass some amount of money to engage the youth actively or gainfully. We need money to fix hospitals. We need money, agriculture, to support agri, and so on and so forth. So we certainly need this money. And once E-levy is going to bring in some amount of revenue, I think I support it. But I still stand by the point that not at the current rate or fee that is being charged.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Peter Quartey, for joining us. This is the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. Okay, so Professor Kofi Abochi is back on. Professor Abochi, so what I want to find out from you is that now that the minority is gone to the Supreme Court to challenge the passage of the E-levy, can the president still go ahead? In fact, can he still go ahead and assent to it?
Oh, yes, of course. The president can go ahead and sign. An application in the Supreme Court of itself is not an injunctive relief, so it doesn't stop the hands of anybody against whom the application or the case is brought. When the president goes ahead and signs, and invariably the Supreme Court decides, and if it turns that the Supreme Court decides in favor of the applicant, the law becomes necessarily unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court has the right to pronounce unconstitutional any action of the president, any action of any actor in Ghana, whether it is after the fact and whether or not the event has been fully consummated. It still doesn't change the fact that the act, which is passed by Parliament and which has been signed to by the president, would have been declared unconstitutional and for that matter void. So that doesn't change anything. In the meantime, the president can go ahead and sign because the business of state must continue. But it can be rendered unconstitutional even after the declaration is made by the court, and the same effect will take place. So the president is not stopped in the meantime simply because of an application process.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Kofi Abochi. But if it's rendered unconstitutional and we've started paying already, what happens to our money?
Well, I can understand the difficulty you have with that, but if that money is going to the state kitty, if you want to chase after yours, you perhaps can go for it. But I understand that invariably by the Constitution, when things are rendered unconstitutional, they are rendered unconstitutional, as the lawyers would say, ab initio. Ab initio means from the beginning. So they are rendered a nullity as if they never existed. So what it means is that if, for example, you have made payments under that law, technically you are entitled to a refund of your money because the money would have been collected without authority. So technically you can go for it, yes. But in the meantime, also as I indicated, the business of state is not grounded merely because there's an application brought to the Supreme Court. If the applicants want to stop the president acting to the law, what the applicants will have to do is to cap their application with a request for an injunction from the Supreme Court pending the decision, so that no action is taken under the law. That can also be done, and I think the court may be minded to listen to such an application because the court would normally balance the cost will normally balance convenience. And, things which, if done, cannot potentially be reversed after a decision is given. The court look at all these conveniences and balances and come to a decision that reflects the respective interests of all the parties involved. And so, yes, you can request an injunction to stop the state from acting in the meantime. But if you don't request that specific application for injunction, the mere fact that you have issued a writ against the state and asking for a particular interpretation would not, of itself, stop the hands of states or the hands of actors of states from proceeding to their constitutional job.
Professor Kofi Abochi, thank you very, very much for joining us. We're very grateful.
Thank you.
Well, that's Professor Ernest Kofi Abochi, who is Dean of the UPSA Law School. Earlier you heard from Professor Peter Korte, who is Director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research. This is the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. And text messages on the Super Morning Show brought to us by Glyco Critical Illness Plan GSIP. It's in your best interest to survive. And so keep your thoughts coming to us. We'll share them with the rest of the world shortly. At Glyco Life, we believe this is the time to protect your future with our life insurance policies. Our products are designed to offer you peace of mind, especially in this COVID-19 era. And so to our policyholders, your claims are very important to us. And we advise you to visit our offices or the Glyco Life website, glycolife.com, to lodge your claims for prompt service. We're surviving COVID-19 together, so please pay your premium via your chosen mode of payment or by Momo on 0591-441473 or by e-premium for micro insurance to safeguard your policies. Our call center team is ready to support you, so call us on 0202 222 for assistance or contact us via our digital channels. We care for your safety. So all our offices are implementing the Ghana Health Services recommended COVID-19 protocols. Please practice social distancing, keep safe, and trust Glyco Life to cushion you for life. But where the other from crowd? Minia, price way. Who be that? 69 Ghana cedis per. So this month of this Ghana month, if you enjoy the very best in entertainment for less on GoTV, and as our gift to you, we are dropping price, from 89 to 69 Ghana cedis. It's a cool deal for you this month. The man has 2 days to go. Grab in one time. Catch authentic, relatable African content on Aquaba Magic, Rock GH, and Trace Jama Plus, various kids channels, sports and movies. Trending. It's just 69 Ghana cedis and it's a limited time offer valid till the 31st of March 2022 into Tutumrika. Go TV, love it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.